right, as we do every Tuesday, we welcome in our good friend, John McMullen, who is out there, as they say, in the trenches when it comes to covering the NFL. And, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's kind enough to join us for a couple moments. Football in the 20s. Johnny Mac, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing very well, my friend. So I guess we can stick Rieger and Canton, right, off of a practice grab.
What was a hell of a catch, man. It was a hell of a catch. Yeah, that's the thing about Jalen Rieger. He had a one-handed catch. It was probably about 2 weeks ago, early August, and it was pretty impressive. And today he outdid himself. But, you know, it's about consistency. No one questions the guy's ability. If you get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, we can talk about CNs and success or failures.
Yep.
If you get drafted in the first round, you're talented. So when you fail, if you fail, and I'm not saying he's going to fail, it generally has to do with other things that we know what can happen to NFL players. It could be anything from work ethic, off the field stuff, tons of things. Coaching staff that doesn't know how to use you. Maybe you butt heads with the coaching staff.
Sure.
There'd be 100 things, but it's not talent. The kid's got talent. What he doesn't have right now is consistency from day to day, never mind game to game. And, you know, there's a lot of crossed fingers when it comes to wide receiver in the Philadelphia Eagles because as we stand here today, look, they want Devontae Smith on the field. They want Jalen Rieger on the field. Of course, Watkins on the field week one against Atlanta. And rookie, second-year guy who barely played and second-year guy who, you know, played about half a season due to injuries, and that's Rieger. That's you know, we always say if this happens, if that happens, if this happens. You know, all those ifs never land in the positive category. There's going to be some positive. There's going to be some negative. So all you can do is cross your fingers.
Yeah, and let's look at some of these positives and negatives, right? Not you don't care about the wins or losses of preseason. You want to get the reps. You want to get out of there unscathed, despite the fact that they dropped a 24-16 decision against the Steelers. Look, Flacco, 10 of 17, $178. Get Hurts out of here. And then you had Hurts 3 of 7. What a couple drops, mind you. Let's start with Jalen, because we already know Flacco brings that veteran leadership. We already know what he's bringing to the Philadelphia Eagles. But, again, small sample size with Hurts. What did you like? You know, we saw, again, a couple of those drops, but he did seem comfortable in the pocket. Mind you, I get it. It was only a couple series.
Yeah, 10 plays, and I think he played really well. I think the numbers, and that's a perfect example why football is not a numbers game. It's not like baseball, where you have a big sample size and you can use the analytics, and it's probably going to bear out to be true over time. Football is a game that, you know, very small sample size in general. And then when you talk about 10 plays, you start talking about, okay, 3 of 7, but there were 2 egregious drops.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that turns into 5 of 7. That's not bad. You know, it's the same thing with Jalen Hurts. Same thing I said with Jalen Rieger, and that's consistency. You know, some days, and he's played very well against the Patriots, 2 joint practices. Probably his best day of camp all summer was Monday. He followed up. He was pretty good today, so hopefully he's improving and getting a little bit more consistent. I can tell you the one bugaboo that I can't get out of my head is he flushes right all the time. It's kind of his default setting when he feels pressure. And, boy, that's not a good thing to do. That's not a good thing to do. You want to climb the pocket.
Yeah.
You want to extend the play that way. You want to manipulate things. The minute you flush out, you're cutting off half the field. You're making it far easier for the defense. Now, he's a little bit different than your average pocket quarterback because he can run the football at least and help you that way. But long term, that's not good. And he does it consistently. And I'm afraid it's going to be his default setting, and I'm afraid because I have experience with this, and people are going to hate this name, but, Christian Ponder was once the 12th pick in the draft. And, man, that kid could verbalize it, Rich. He would say what he was doing wrong. He would say he's got to climb the pot, and he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. The minute he felt anything, he flushed right, and the play was essentially over. That's my one concern. That's my big concern. Not my one concern, but that's my biggest concern.
Flacco was 10 of 17 for $178 in the touchdown. Obviously, the long catch and run that we saw, Watkins getting into the mix with the one reception, 79 yards, showed a boatload of speed. I mean, you watch Flacco, I get it. It's preseason, man. The guy can still sling it. But there is a reason, though, that they brought him in as a backup. And you've kind of kept going back to, look, they keep giving Hurts first team reps, but yet they're still not going to name him starter, which maybe is the worst kept secret in this area. But, man, look, I still think Flacco can play a little bit, and I think he showed you that the other night. I mean, any specific takeaway from what Joe did against the Pittsburgh Steelers?
No, I think I think he showed that a lot of people said, why are the Eagles signing Joe Flacco? Why are they giving him so much money to be a backup quarterback? It's a dumb decision. Man, there are a lot of good quarterbacks in this league. There's not 32 at any given time that deserve to be starters. And when you start rolling down the backups, and you see some preseason football that's so ugly, a couple teams shut down 35, 40 players in preseason week one, and they had to play the whole games with their backup quarterbacks, and you see how ugly he can get. He's competent. And if you wanted to go up and down the league and look at backup quarterbacks, I guarantee he's in the top 10. I guarantee you. Or you're going to be doing some mental gymnastics to get him out of the top 10. So he's a good backup quarterback, and that's what they brought him here for. And, if he's starting for more than a game or two here or there due to a sprained ankle or something like that, the season isn't going the way they envisioned. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Or they might be out of the gate 1-4, 1-5, 1-6, and you have a young quarterback struggling. I mean, that's just that's kind of what I look for. But look, I mean, I always think you can, like you said, I'm looking at the Giants and the Jets. I'm watching the Giants the other night. I mean, come on, utterly ridiculous with their backup situation. The wide receiver depth, I think that's always a good problem to have, is it not? I mean, where do you stand right now with these wideouts?
Well, it's a little better over the past week, and they certainly played well against the Patriots. But again, they have some talent. Obviously, it starts with Devontae Smith, and he was back at practice today, a little bit in team drills. Didn't do a heck of a lot. Didn't even get thrown the football. So they're still going to be cautious with him. I don't think he's going to play on Thursday night. They want to get him to week one. We talked about Rager.
Yep.
Brilliant catch. Everybody should check it out. OBJ-like catch. Just snatched it out of the air. Went up. He's got the 42-inch vertical leap. Just spectacular. But you got to see it in a game environment. You got to see it consistently. We haven't seen it yet. And you mentioned Quez Watkins, the explosiveness, the speed. We all know he can run, but it takes more to play the wide receiver position on a consistent basis. He's been really good in camp. We'll see if he can finish the deal. Even J.J. Arcega-Whiteside had a good day today. And the one guy who's going in a negative direction is Travis Fulgham. He has not played well over the past 7 or 10 days. And then you have Greg Ward, who's kind of the constant, and he's probably going to be there as the fourth receiver. Look, if you look at the rest of the NFL, it's not good.
No.
If you look at what it's been, it's getting better.
Goddard's playing for a contract extension, but Ertz saw more time with the first team, the starters out there, and I'm just wondering, can you see a scenario where maybe that forces the Eagles back into a ton of 12 personnel?
Yeah, I can. If he's here, and Nick Sirianni seemed to be shifting, it's becoming clearer and clearer how he's playing this game of chicken, essentially, and hoping some injury pops up on a contender somewhere at tight end, and they say, okay, we'll give you a day 2 pick, and then we'll make the move. But that's unlikely. Odds-wise, that's unlikely to happen. Sort of out of the Sam Bradford playbook, that's what they're trying to play. And if he's there, I mean, Nick Sirianni's going to play him because he's better than the receiving options. I mean, if you count Jalen Reagor as your 2 and Quez Watkins as your 3, which is how it's shaping up, you're going to play them more than Zach Ertz? I mean, you could say you want speed on the field. Okay, I understand that, but coaches want good players on the field, no matter how they get it done. So he'll come to the same default setting as Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson every year would say the same thing. Want to play more 11 personnel, want to get more receivers on the field. They couldn't do it because they didn't have the receivers.
You know, I went back and I watched the game, and the kid, and I think we talked about him last year, Alex Singleton, man. I looked at the last 4 or 5 games going back to last year. And he had, I think he had 16, 17 tackles in November against the Giants. But then you just saw he was just so active, and he would have a couple sacks here, a couple of assists, a couple tackles, moving, left to right, sideline to sideline. I'm impressed with this kid, man. He can play. He can definitely play.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's a good player, and it's really an indictment of the NFL. You see it all around the place in this league. I mean, if you don't have that pedigree, if you don't have that first-round tag, second-round tag, day 2 tag, and you're an undrafted free agent, I mean, if you do get a chance, it's going to be a really, really narrow path. And you look at Singleton, I mean, he had to go from camp to camp to camp. Then he had to go to the CFL, where he turned into the best defensive player in the CFL. And then he came back to be a special teams player. And the Eagles didn't want to play him. They didn't want to play him. Due to injuries and all that kind of attrition, and Nate Gary and T.J. Edwards being out of the lineup, they throw him out there, and he plays so well they can't take him off the field.
Right.
Now, you can say, how well can you play? You're 4-11-1. Well, the point is he played better than those guys, but those guys were supposed to be better.
Yeah.
And they're not better. And he's now almost entrenched as a starting linebacker. You saw how active he was, and remember he had a breakthrough COVID infection. Wasn't even at camp for the first 10 days or so. He's just one of those linebackers. He's really instinctive. Ken Torjol, the old linebackers coach, called it high-speed internet. He just has a nose for the football, no false steps. So everybody's talking. I used to talk about this with Jack Del Rio, who I always tell people, people don't realize this, because Jack, for those old enough to remember him as a player, he wasn't the fastest guy in the world. But he was maybe one of the most instinctive nickel linebackers I ever saw in pass coverage. He was great. He was great at it because he knew where to drop. He knew where the zones were. He understood where the quarterback was going. I see a little. I'm not going to say Alex is that good, but I see a little bit of that in Alex Singleton, and the fact that, hey, you can run a 4-4 like Davion Taylor. You take one false step, you're out of the play. Alex Singleton's not taking any false steps because he knows what's going on.
No, not a bad comparison. I mean, even think about it. You had a player in Del Rio that can be right side. He can be inside. He can be middle linebacker. Guy had over 1,000 tackles in his career. So not a bad comparison. What did you make? This is another player that you and I have talked about. I think the Jets probably got rid of this headache, and Jamal Adams agreeing to that 4-year extension now, maximum value at $72 million with Seattle. I mean, look, at the end of the day, he got what he wanted, right? I mean, in the negotiation, he was looking for X amount. Boom, he becomes the team's third highest paid player in terms of average per salary behind Russell Wilson, and I think Bobby Wagner. I mean, look, Adams, he's a very good player. I just don't know, man. He strikes me as a headache. He really does.
Well, he has been. Well, I think those two things aren't mutually exclusive. He's a very good player. He's been a headache. And those guys, he's also a player you got to use correctly. I mean, he's a box safety.
Yep.
You know, if you're going to play cover 2, he's not going to fit. But, man, if you use him right, he's like a heat-seeking missile near the line of scrimmage. I mean, he can make game-changing plays. So all of this kind of factors into it. But, you know, once you're a headache and you're still getting a contract like that, we were just talking about talent. You know you're talented, and he's really, really talented. You went through it with the Giants a little bit, not quite at that level with Landon Collins, as far as the type of player.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to play Landon Collins as a cover 2, cover 3 guy, but they can make some things happen at the line of scrimmage, and Adams even more so. So, I mean, they made the deal for him. You got him. I mean, that's a bit of that as well.
I know you're upset about this, and I know you called it, and I understand, but I think you're torn here that I'll spend 30 seconds on Sexy Jesus now being cut by the Jacksonville Jags.
I got a kick that everybody was all up and on. They thought he was going to make the football
come on,
team.
Man. You're not going to give that. You're not going to give him a roster spot. It was just a favor.
Yeah, it was so silly from the beginning. I mean, when he was here in Philadelphia, I think Chip Kelly was doing him a favor. You know, when there's 90, roster spots, you can get all high and mighty and say, well, everybody's fighting for a position and, you're taking a spot away from somebody else. Look, if that's your deal, that's your deal. I'm not gonna try to talk you out of it. But look, this is a very kind of profession where you know who you know means a lot, and everybody has got 1 or 2 players on the back end of the roster. You're doing a favor for somebody. Might be an old teammate. Might be a local kid from a local college. Might be a favor to an agent. That's what Tim Tebow was. And I mean, I don't know. People get up and on it. You know how it is. People like to get outraged and everything. Outrage Incorporated.
Yes, exactly, especially on social media. Lastly, before I let you out of here, this pipe dream now, Eagles trading for Deshaun Watson. I mean, folks, come on. I mean, I'm reading, and Amy Dash has been on top of this with the coverage here. I mean, now you're starting to bring in potentially human trafficking, sex trafficking. I mean, if you're the Texans, why are you even just allowing him to be out there? I know he's not practicing, but why is he even in the facility near the team? I don't...
Well, they can't do it. They can't. I mean, the NFL, the Texans were hoping that the NFL would put him on the exempt list. The NFL didn't do that, and their hands were tied as far as... Remember, these things are collectively bargained with the union. You can't just suspend somebody. You just can't take away somebody's right to make a living, stop paying them. You can cut them. Now, if you want to go down that route and say, the Vikings got Jeff Gladney, who was a first-round pick when he got in trouble. But this is different at the quarterback position. And there's tremendous value there if this ever gets cleared up. And they don't want to give up the assets. So if you want to go again, second time, if you want to go to the moral routes, look, if the Texans cut him, at some point he's going to be playing for somebody else, with the possible exception if he goes to jail. And I'll just say this, and I said, I know Tony Busby was talking about the FBI, and,
yep.
It makes sense from an interstate perspective, well, look, you got to see how it shakes out. Tony Busby has not been the most credible source in these types of things. I have not. The Houston Police Department has an open investigation. I have heard nothing about a federal investigation. Now, if Amy said that, I haven't seen it because I've been immersed in Eagle stuff. Certainly, that changes the game, but it goes both ways with this Deshaun Watson story, and the fact that you have people that want to, ban him from football, and they don't understand you can't do that because there's a very, very powerful union, and you can't just take away somebody's right to make a living, somebody's contract, and say, okay, that's it, we're done with you, you're banned, you're banished from the island, you're set adrift. You're going to get sued and you're going to lose. People have to understand that.
I think they do. I think it's more from a distraction and PR hit. So apparently from this press conference earlier in April with Busby, quote, Deshaun Watson reaches out to a woman in Atlanta. Okay, hear what I'm saying. He reaches out to a woman via direct message on Instagram who's located in Atlanta, Georgia. He does this while he's in Houston. They ask her for a massage. He tells her, fly her in. He buys her a plane ticket. He arranges for her Uber from the airport. He Ubers her to the Houstonian. This is per Busby. Hence, your potential, in essence, federal offense, sex trafficking. So, I don't know how in the world, and I get it. He talks a lot. I totally understand this. I don't know if they were interrogating him or not. I don't know if people are calling BS on Busby or not. I don't know if they're trying to, this is a ploy to get Watson to settle. I don't know who's lying. I don't. But you would think at this moment, or even yesterday or the day before, the NFL, I'm not asking them to come out with a comment per se, because I'm sure there's a lot more going on than we know, that we see on the surface. But this is probably the worst case scenario for the NFL, because I bet you if it was up to Goodell and the NFL, they would want to make this easy peasy. This guy's guilty of X, Y, and Z, suspend him, and we don't have to deal with him and let the Texans worry about him.
Well, they would, and that's why they were kind of, I don't want to say hoping from the league's perspective. The Texans were hoping he would be put on the commissioner's exempt list, and, that at least, presses pause on the entire thing. You got to pay him, but he goes away, and things can shake out from the legal standpoint, and then when things actually shake out, we get the facts, we'll know what the situation is. That was what the Texans were certainly hoping for. By the league not putting him on the exempt list, and I know Tom Pelissero mentioned this, and obviously working for NFL media, he's very plugged in. Look, what they're signaling is we don't have any evidence to put this guy on a commissioner's exempt list. Now, they also don't have even though they have an investigation business, they don't have any subpoena power or anything of that nature. So I always think it's silly when they talk about their investigations. So the most credible part to me is the Houston Police Department. Now, you can say what you want to say. They may take it to a grand jury. There are reports of that. The case has been open for a long time. And I talked to Dan Lust. I talked to a number of lawyers. Look, the longer you have these types of cases, it's difficult to prove from a prosecution standpoint. And then you have the politics come into it and say, okay, are they going to make an example of Deshaun Watson because he's a celebrity, or are they going to say we can't win this case? You don't know how that's going. There's so many unknowns. And, people can't wait for the answers. And I don't know what to tell them because there's been too much smoke blown from both sides. So I just looked at the Houston PD. What are they doing? I don't care what Rusty Harden says. I don't care what Tony Busby says. And to date, they have not indicted Deshaun Watson. if they do indict him, he'll be put on the exempt list.
Yeah.
And then everything can hit the pause button.
Johnny Mack joins us every Tuesday, football in the 20s, right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Give him a follow on Twitter at JF McMullen, Eagles Insider. And, of course, right here, 1490 Sports Betting Radio, Birds 365, Extend the Play, SI Now. Did you get he's all over the place, Philly voice. Did you get a selfie with the GOAT or no?
I didn't get a selfie with the GOAT, but I got a nice picture of the GOAT, and he said hello. And it's always good when you get recognized by the greatest of all time.
This is true. The GOAT / the hoodie. All right, Johnny Mack, I always appreciate it, pal. Keep up the great work. Enjoy it on Thursday, and we'll talk next week, bud.
All right, thanks.
All right, our guy, Johnny McMullen. Johnny Mack, quick timeout, 4:47.